All right, brother. So once again, thank you very much for making the time to join us tonight. Just want to keep some housekeeping notes. If you can please make sure you mute yourself and turn off your camera, I will greatly appreciate it. So yeah, thank you very much. So welcome, brothers. I am excited because we're going to finally get to write the content for our Crescent Club Development Program. I mean, it's been now almost 4 years in the making as far as the committee putting it together, putting the concept, vetting it through the different stakeholders of the fraternity. And so now here we are at this point. So I am very excited to have this team assemble to get to do the work of the fraternity. So what I am going to do tonight, because I know some of you are familiar with what we've been doing the past 4 years, but some of you may not. I'm going to give you a brief overview because I think it is important to shape your perception, your understanding of how you can go about creating the content. And once I get through it, I will tell you what the different work groups are, and then I'll take some questions. And I'm sure that, again, if you have any questions after the presentation, make sure that you just follow up with me. So once again, brothers, please make sure you're muting yourself and turning off your cameras. And I can see some of your lovely faces, but I don't want to see your lovely faces, so please make sure you're turning off your cameras, all right? Okay, brothers, we're diving right into it. So we already welcome you. Thank you very much. This is the team of brothers that we have put together. We have brothers from across the entire fraternity of different regions at various levels. So we have brothers that were just initiated like a year ago to brothers that have been in the fraternity probably longer than I've been alive. And so that's very exciting. We have regional officers, we have international officers, we have local officers. So everyone has been able to contribute and now going to pitch in. So we'll definitely get a product that is very reflective of the entire fraternity. So I'm very excited. Let me give you a brief overview of our Crescent Club Development Program. So that way you can kind of get an idea and it can shape the way you go about creating the content. So essentially, we decided to create the program. It was about 30 brothers or so that helped put the initial proposal together. So we kicked around different ideas, how we can use technology and so forth. And it all culminated at the Detroit Conclave when the brothers approved the outline that we were going to write the content for. So basically, the idea was that we don't like intake, right? I don't like intake. Y'all don't like intake. I know I'm like Mr. Intake Man, and I talk to you all about it. I support it because that's what the Conclave has voted for, but I know that it leaves much to be desired for. So we decided that MIP was not the way to go and that instead we should go back to basics for us. So we want to reestablish the Crescent Club, but we added the development component to it because it's not just about bringing in brothers, but really mentoring them and guiding them and preparing them to be good Sigmas, but also good men. So, and we wanted to bring back traditions, and that's something that's very important to us. And so add a little bit of the old, mix it in with the new to bring it to the current century that can address the issues that we have going on currently. So these are some of the enhancements, and again, I sent you the original presentation, so everything is in there, but these are some of the highlights. So we want to make sure that as we're preparing this and you're writing this, keep in mind there are some overlaps between collegiate and alumni brothers that go through the program, but keep in mind that there may be some differences. So as you are preparing the content, think about, do you need to make some adjustments to the content? So for instance, history, probably not, because we all need to learn the same history, whether you're alumni or collegiate, but perhaps when we get to the brotherhood development retreats, we probably want to make sure that we're being cognizant that the activities we do for alumni brothers vary than for the activities we're doing for collegiate brothers. And so one of the things that we also wanted to do, and we already talked about the name, but make sure that we are empowering our chapters to run their programs again. So currently, in the current model, if it's being followed as an intake team, which means that perhaps you can have members of your chapter conduct intake and bring in members, perhaps you don't. And a lot of it is dominated by the alumni brothers. So what we want to do is really empower brothers to be able to run their own process. So we're going to put it back on the chapters, but we're going to assign a Crescent Club consultant, and so that person will sort of fill in some of the responsibilities that the current MIP chairman does as far as making sure the paperwork is being followed, that the rules are being followed, and so forth. So that's one of the big enhancements that I really like about this program is that our collegiate brothers get to run their process as they want, as they see fit on their campus, but we'll still maintain some fraternity oversight by having that consultant there to provide guidance and make sure that our policies are being met. So one of the things about MIP now, again, when you're following MIP to the letter, you realize that the first 2 weeks is consumed by paperwork. And so what we're going to do is really take the paperwork out of the educational part, so MIP will not begin until all paperwork has been completed and we have vetted candidates through. So currently, again, if you're following the MIP, you can have an informational meeting and you can request permission to do all this and do the interviews and then realize these men don't meet the criteria. So what we're doing is only men that meet the criteria should move forward in the process to get an interview and then to get selected. So that way we're taking care of the paperwork prior to the education. All right, so we list quite some things the chapters need to make sure they're completed in order to follow through on the Crescent Club Development Program. I think one of the biggest pieces that it is done across some regions, but it's not necessarily the fraternity standard. So one of the things that we want to do with the program, make sure that we're taking individual practices and making them fraternity standards. So definitely communicating with the campus fraternity sorority life office to make sure that our chapters are in good standing, because there are instances where they may be suspended by the school because they didn't meet some paperwork criteria, or maybe something happened that wasn't communicated to the region or to the headquarters, and we assume that they're still in good standing, but they're not telling us these things. So making sure that we make that a standard, that chapters need to prove that they are in good standing with their campuses so that they can move forward. Also, we want to make sure that it's not just the equivalent of what the intake chairman now is that's certified in MIP, but that for the Crescent Club Development Program, we want every leader within the chapter to become certified, so that way they understand what's happening and there can be some checks and balances and support there. So we wanted to do some things in the pre-informational meeting. So again, making sure that they're bringing us letters of recommendation and observing them more formally. And again, these are things that chapters can do now, but I think is not the standard across the fraternity. So that, again, that's one thing that we want to do is standardize these practices. All right. So in order to execute the program, we're going to divide it into phases. And so we're going to have an orientation phase. So during the orientation phase, we're going to, all the things that you would do in the first 2 weeks of MIP are going to get moved to the orientation phase. So the program hasn't even started at this point yet. So at orientation, they're going to learn about the anti-hazing stance of the fraternity. They're going to understand what the schedule is, the different roles that the brothers are going to play in the program. They're going to get an overview of what the program is. Because one of the pieces that I think is missing is that we don't really clearly articulate just how much work and effort it takes to join the fraternity. And it does take work and effort. There's a lot of things they need to learn, a lot of different things they need to do. So we want to make sure that we're explaining that clearly to them and letting them know what that is going to look like. It's not unmanageable, but it is going to require effort on their part. I think that's where some people fall short. They don't realize they have to put effort into this. And so we'll review whatever policies we need to discuss, give them application and timelines and so forth. And so they take care of all this, they get vetted through, they bring us the application, we read them, and then those that meet the criteria, they get to go into interviews and get selected and so forth. The next part, we have our CCDP educational modules. So we still like the idea of educational modules that we have within the current MIP, but what we're going to do is take the modules, and rather than being one, we're going to break them up into two hours each, and so that way we can administer more of the education happening. What we want to look at to do is how to use technology, and so I know that as we're looking to figure out how to better use the blueprint, how do we use technology to deliver some content outside of the educational sessions for the Crescents to learn information and be able to have more time for the brothers to interact with them and build more brotherhood. All right, so these are the educational modules. So module 1, it'll begin basically. So let me back up a little bit. Some of the feedback we got from brothers is that the current process is a bit disjointed. So you don't start fraternity history until module 2, and so that it doesn't make much sense. And so one of the things that we heard from brothers as we assessed them was that we want to have the modules align with the way that the light is set up and how history and information is taught. So that in module 1, it's a fraternity overview. So they'll be getting tested on the things we covered during the orientation to make sure that they were paying attention. But also we're going to start laying down the foundation, talking about what expectations we have of them and what they should do, and then jump right into fraternity history and laying down what it means to be in the organization and so forth. So we'll start with fraternity history and painting a picture where Sigma started. When we get to module 2, again, we'll continue with more of the fraternity history. We'll weave it into like the structure of the fraternity. We'll talk about our national programs. So now they know where the fraternity started. Now they get to learn about our different national programs and so forth, so they can start getting a better picture. In module 3, we're going to talk about symbolism, and I know that's one thing that's sort of missing from the current MIP. So we're going to talk about our brand as a fraternity. So we really want to discuss that, like what is acceptable and what isn't. What are the official symbols? Let's talk about that, right? What are those things that are in the ritual that are official? And we're just going to talk about them and tell them what they are. We will not explain them. So please don't think that we're going to reveal secrets during the modules. We're just going to talk about them as they're written in the light, right? So we have a fraternity flower. That's not a secret. What it means to us is the secret. So we're going to talk about our unofficial symbols, right? So you have gold mob and blue fire and the hand sign, that we all treat them very much like they ritual, but they're not in the ritual. So they are symbols that have become a part of who we are, but they're not official symbols. And then we'll talk about the unacceptable symbols, the things that maybe a local chapter has put together and they put that out there. I'm talking about copyright infringement and how we should not be using those things and so forth. Because again, I think it's hard to hold a brother accountable for using inappropriate imagery and iconography in our fraternity if we haven't made the efforts to teach brothers this is what is Sigma, this is what is Sigma is not. So I think that's one of the pieces that I feel very passionate about in terms of this program, being able to teach that to our brothers. So you called and we heard you, and so in reintroducing a more concerted effort to go over songs and poems of our fraternity. And so one of the things that we want to do in the group, the guests, is one of the things that we want to ask them to do is to also get the music. Like, how are these songs supposed to be sang? Because you know that when we go to different places, the hymn might sound a little bit different depending where you're at. Now, I've been in 3 regions now, and let me tell you that within the 3 regions, it sounds different. Sometimes because brothers just sing it differently. Sometimes some of us are a little tone deaf. So being able to provide that as well to sort of so that we know what it's supposed to sound like. So there's a section in the Sigma Light that talks about historical essays of our fraternity, and so it gets to give us a more in-depth look at our charter members in the early years of the fraternity. So during Module 5, we're going to cover that. Because, again, it is important that brothers understand just the way the families went about selecting our charter members and just what the fraternity went through in its early days. I think it really, at least for me, it helps me to appreciate the fraternity a lot more. And it's knowledge that brothers said was missing from the current program that they really wanted to see reintroduced. And, of course, Zeta Phi Beta's history. Our current module doesn't really discuss it, but this is a section in the light. So, again, a lot of us, well, speaking for myself, and I'm sure there's some other people like me that feel this way, it's part of who we are, it's part of our history. So I think it's important that we discuss that and that we tell the history of Sigma and Zeta the way it's supposed to be said and told, not the way others may want to make it out to be. So we reintroducing this and going more into depth. Yes, we waited to the end because while Zeta is important, we also have to recognize we want to get through Sigma and stuff first and then go right into the Sora stuff as well afterwards. That's those are the educational modules in a nutshell. And so when you look into the more detailed presentation, it covers that more at length. Of course, we'll have final assessments. We will still keep the minimum score of 80% for candidates to pass the test. One thing that we're looking at to see is making it web-based. So that is something that I need to figure out. What are we doing as far as our learning management systems, what we're trying to implement, and see how that can get incorporated into it. But that is one of the goals of this program is to make that web-based. So we're going to have 2 brotherhood development retreats. And so one will focus on personal development, one will focus on leadership development. And so the idea is that at these retreats, brothers will have an opportunity to interact with Crescents, and there'll be team building activities and speaking about different skills that brothers and Crescents need to have once they, especially Crescents coming into the fraternity. So alumni chapters have a bit more flexibility as far as the location, but for collegiate chapters, it must happen on campus. And again, that's part of one of the things that we needed to do with this program was manage liabilities and figuring out how we can best protect ourselves. So keeping things on campus is what we want to do. We have the time frame between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. So as you're doing it, I want the group that's going to work on the Brotherhood Development Retreats, I want you to look at them as 2 parts separated by lunch. So the first 3 hours you're covering, whatever it is that you're covering during part 1. You have a lunch break, and then the second session would be another 3 hours of whatever activities that you're covering. And so those are some of the different topics that you can cover underneath each retreat. If for some reason you feel like maybe there's something else that we need to add to it, maybe want to modify, absolutely. I can tell you that I know that definitely the conflict resolution piece is very important, as well as the values exploration is also very important. And on the leadership development, again, it's the same thing. These are some of the ideas and topics that we put out there. But as the team gets together, one of the things that we want for this program is to really be up its time, so that if there's something that we need to change or something that we need to include in it to account for whatever has happened nationally in the fraternity or somewhere around the country, that we can use this as an opportunity to do so. All right, so we have a part called deliverables, and one of the things that we wanted to do and that we talked about as we went to the different regions, and then when we discussed the Sirius Sigma Summit, is that we want Crescents to have activities they need to complete before they are initiated. So right now, there's a service project that their candidates for membership need to prepare, but they don't execute until after they get initiated. So we're saying if Brotherhood, Scholarship, and Service, these are our principles, right? And everything that we do in our program needs to be aligned with our fraternity's principles. Why not have them execute a community service in conjunction with the chapter, right? And being able to work together. And as I work with different fraternities and sororities, some of them make that a requirement, right? That they do a community service project. So I think that we can make that happen, and it's not, and so thinking about it, that's the standard that we want to create, right? And so we cannot get upset if we're bringing brothers who don't value doing service if we're not making service a high priority while they're going through their program, through the process to join the fraternity. So this group will be in charge of figuring out what that will look like how do they do it, and so forth. And so I think part of it is looking at the timeline and what will make sense. Ideally, we can, if they can do like a fundraising activity, an educational program, community service, that'd be great. But if only the community service is what makes the most sense, then that's fine as well. All right, one of the things that we were intentional about talking in this program and including and standardizing is the new member presentations, i.e. coming out shows, i.e. probate shows, whatever the terminology that the chapters are using. But we've seen that some brothers do an amazing job as far as how brothers come out there dressed, the things that they say, the performance on point. There are some others that kind of make me scratch my head and I just wonder what were the brothers thinking. But again, we cannot get upset with them because we haven't provided guidance in terms of what that should look like. So the team that will work on this will be responsible for thinking about when we look across different timelines on Facebook, right, or we're on Instagram, and we're looking at those different timelines, what should new member presentations look like across the board? I know when we look at some organizations, they're very uniform, like colors, the attire, everything is very uniform. I am not necessarily recommending that's what we do, but if that's what direction we want to go in, that's okay as well. But really thinking about how do we standardize it so that there is some commonalities and some consistency that supports the brand of the fraternity. As well as thinking about, and I heard is from one of the brothers in our organization in the sorority that I work for, someone else said something similar to this. And that's that how do we use the practices for probate shows as opportunities to have leadership development for our members, right? Like how do we teach our members to give feedback to the Crescents and how the Crescents then, can receive and also give feedback and so forth. So these could be really great opportunities to provide practical opportunities for Crescents and brothers to apply the principles that they're learning throughout the program. So I really like that, and I'm looking forward to seeing what this group comes up with. Then, of course, we have after membership. So the membership part, that one we're talking about, once you're a member, now what? And so one of the things that I see across all fraternities and sororities is that we initiate, when members get initiated, there isn't that follow-up plan in terms of how you keep them engaged in the organization. So simple. So what we're looking to do within this first 6 months of a neophyte's existence in the fraternity, we want to make sure that they're doing some key things, right? So how are they connecting with key campus administrators? I know for me, I used to take my guys after they were initiated to meet the different offices that were important, and like the vice president, student affairs, residence life, Greek life, all these different offices, so that way they can build their own connections and people know who they are. Some brothers, some chapters do that. Most chapters probably are not. But how do we make that a consistency plan? Connecting with fraternity, sorority life on campus, we talked about that. Other sigmas and zetas in the area. And I think for me, because in Southern California we were well connected, what I'm learning is that that's not necessarily how it works in other states, in other areas. So how are we being intentional about brothers introducing neophytes to other brothers in the areas and other zetas in the area and building that relationship? Talking to them about attending different conferences, reviewing rituals, and so forth, right? And then the next 6 months and beyond, that's more of a independent development plan. And so that's really a choose your own adventure type of thing, where depending what the brother needs, the brother goes and look for that. So maybe it's about networking with brothers in the same career field. Maybe it's about taking more leadership skills. Maybe it's about preparing them to develop themselves as professionals. Whatever that looks like for them, that's what we want the post-membership piece to be, so that way they feel like the fraternity is giving them something so they can still continue their involvement after graduation. All right, so let's talk about our content writers. So again, I'm gonna send you all an email. You're gonna see your name. I'm gonna send you an email. It's gonna have a Google Drive folder. All the information you need is there. But we're gonna have a team working in all 6 modules, and we're gonna have a team working with the other pieces. So the orientation and timeline our brotherhood development retreats for the personal development, the leadership development, our deliverables, and the new member presentation. So we're going to have a team lead, and that person will be responsible for making sure that things are being collected and so forth, and then being turned in. So a couple of things for the writing teams. Brother Stephen Russ, he is the lead content writer, so he is going to take all the wonderful work you do and streamline it to make it sound like one coherent document. And we realize that we're going to have different writing styles, so his job is going to be to put it together, the final document. My job as the project manager is to make sure whatever resources you need, you can get them, make sure that we're staying on task to get this completed, and so forth. So about the writing process, in the Google Drive that you're going to get, there will be a folder, and it has a template for writing the content. So this is right here the format that we want it to look like. And if you have any questions, please let me know, and I'll be more than happy to clear it up for you. So we want to make sure that it looks like this, because the current manual is great. It provides a lot of great information, but it's not a step-by-step guide in terms of how you should deliver this. And what some of the feedback we have received is that while some brothers are good facilitators, a lot of them are not. And so they don't understand how to go about delivering things, and at what point do you say these different things and so forth. So we want to make it into a facilitator guide that brothers can then go ahead and know, whoever, it doesn't matter who it is. If you can read and understand how to follow directions, you can just read through this and know what you need to do. So one of the things to help you is in this Google Drive. It's a Crescent Club Development Program Google Drive, and we have some subfolders. So we have one with resources, and they include a variety of things for you to look at if you want to get ideas as far as team building activities, or there's some Sigma Leadership Academy programs that have been done before. Maybe you can borrow from there. It's a folder with sample curriculum. This is these are different curricula from other organizations that I've had the opportunity to volunteer for and work with. I just ask that when you look through it, it's okay to look through it, but please, if you're going to borrow something from there, let me know, because I need to make sure that we can get permission to use their material. And I also ask that you don't share whatever is in that folder, just out of respect for our partners in the other fraternities and sororities that I get a chance to volunteer for. And then there's another folder where you can, the completed CCDP curriculum. In there, that's where you will find a template, and I'm going to put this all in an email for you that you'll get by tomorrow morning. And so once you have it done, just upload it there, so that way Brother Russ can go in there, take a look at it, and make whatever modifications, all right? So remember, each module should be divided into two parts, so there's module 1A and 1B. We want to ask you to create a study guide that outlines the information Crescents need to know. There's going to be a lot of content. So what I noticed when I used to run intake, what will help brothers, the candidates for membership, learn things very well, was if I gave them a study guide and said, these are the things that you're responsible for knowing. Everything else is, of course, is important, but what are the things that we know as Sigma men we need to know and understand? We also want to ask you to write 10 to 15 questions with answers based on the content. And these will serve as the assessment for that particular part. So you can just write 10 to 15 questions for both Part A and Part B. It doesn't have to be 15 for each part. So just 15 questions per module. 10 to 15 questions per module. We also want to ask you to include a team building activity at the beginning of every section. We have the current MIP educational modules, and so incorporate those into the CCDP. And so your team leaders are going to be the ones that are responsible that the appropriate format is being followed. So again, work with them, get the information to them, however it is. For team leaders, we expect that you'll make sure that the content is aligned with the format that we need it to. And so our deadline to get this done is July 1st, 2018. And I know you're thinking that's a pretty aggressive deadline. And I'll say yes, it is. Considering the number of people that we have working on the program, considering that there's a lot of work already done, there's a lot of information out there that just needs to be put together, and considering that we're breaking stuff down into smaller quantities, it is very doable to get it done. So we'll talk about the timeline. So we're having the meeting today. By Tuesday, I expect that group leaders have reached out to the group and set up your workflow. Whatever that looks like. So if you're going to have a meeting and to talk about what you're going to do and discuss it, whatever that looks like. But by the 22nd, and I'll be following up with you to make sure it's been done, please contact your group, email them, and set it up, get it together, and so we can move forward. I'll do another follow-up on June 1st. To make sure that to see where you are with your content progress. By June 15th, we want a content rough draft or whatever you're doing. Send in, upload it to the Google Drive so that way we can take a look through it, so that brother Russ has time to look through and provide feedback to the team leaders. So again, I know that it seems like it's not a lot of time, but again, once you look through the different manuals and you realize a lot of information has already been written for you, it's just a matter for you to lay it out and put it into just the that facilitation guide format. So we want to find whatever final revisions need to be done, get it done between the 25th and the 30th, so that by 12 p.m. on June 30th, the final draft needs to be uploaded, and by 12 p.m. so that way the brother Russ can look through it, because I need to submit it to our executive director on July 1st, and he will turn it into the general board. So here's the great thing is that all they're looking for is a rough draft in terms of what this document is going to look like. We don't have to worry about all the different bells and whistles that comes attached to this. Their main concern is, what does the guide look like? What is the content that we're teaching the men? Like, what are we going to do? That's what they really want to be able to see by then. So they want to see what these 5 or these 6 modules are going to look like. And yeah. So that is their main concern. All right, now I am going to open it up for questions. So what questions do you all have, brothers? And again, if you don't get to answer one or you think of one afterwards, you feel free to email me, and I'll be more than happy to respond. So what questions do we have, brothers? You can type it in the chat window, or you can unmute yourself.
Matos?
Yes.
Hey, this is Brother Justin Gibson in Cincinnati.
Hey, how's it going, brother?
Going well. Thank you so much for coordinating this. I think brothers around the world, when they see this, they'll be pleased in the effort and the thoughtfulness that went into this, because MIP, for a lot of different reasons, brothers weren't feeling it. Anyway, I just wanted to say I'm happy. I'm on the Module 3 team, and I'm excited about that. If we have something that we can contribute to any of the other modules, just shoot some documents and stuff, or do you encourage us to send those to the module leaders?
That is such a great question, and the short answer is yes. Please, if you have something you believe Module 1 can benefit from, please share that with them, right? Same thing. The brothers doing the new member presentation, if there's something you're like, oh my gosh, this would totally be great for Module 2, get them that information. I just want to ask you, though, in the spirit of being brotherly and supportive and excitement, let's not lose focus of making sure your stuff gets done as well. So as long as your stuff is getting done, you're not losing sight of that, please, by all means, share away. And so, yes. And I ask you all that if you upload something to the Google Drive folder, which you totally can upload resources, just email us or email me and let me know, and I can just let everyone know as far as like things have been uploaded and updated. That'd be very helpful. Any other questions?
Hey, Raphael, this is TJ.
Hey, TJ.
What's going on, man?
Man,
Not necessarily a question, but on one of your earlier slides, you had something in reference to the chapter officers and making contact with them, or them going through this educational process to know what the CCDP will require of them. If you could just add, because one of the things you said in there was that something had to be done prior to the paperwork process or something like that. If we could also add that they need to update their chapter officers in the blueprint prior to requesting the initial intake or them beginning the process. And that way we'll know, I'm assuming that's what you all are going to use to make initial contact to verify that the people who are officers are actually doing what they're supposed to do based on what we have in the blueprint versus getting some from each one of the respective regional directors. So if we just push them to make that change in there, we'll know we're dealing with the correct people.
Brother Lewis, thank you very much for bringing that up. I appreciate you highlighting that because while it was implied, I think it's important for us to be very cognizant to clearly spell that out. So I am making a note to remind, to add to there that chapters need to clearly update. I'm adding a note to clearly tell chapters that they need to update their blueprint rosters prior to getting approval to conduct intake or run a Crescent Club program.
Brother Matos, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
This is Theo. I was thinking that one thing to include maybe near the front of the manual is maybe something that describes any additional steps or pinpoints for chapters that are reactivating on campus, because their paperwork and things that they have to look out might look slightly different than a chapter that's been active for a while. So that's also something to consider. So.
Could you expand a little bit on what you're trying to say? Because I know where you're coming from, but I want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly.
So, for example, if a chapter hasn't been active on a campus for a while, they might not necessarily know about reactivation fees and all that kind of thing. So, just different points of paperwork that are slightly different from a chapter that has been around for a while. So, if there's anything additional that they have to do on the campus side as a new chapter versus an old chapter, or a reactivating chapter on their campus. Same thing with IHQ.
So just outlining the additional steps non-active chapters or new chapters need to take.
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough. Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
I have a question. This is Brett.
Yes.
Is there any type of budget, just in case something comes up or there's content that we found that we could potentially use? And then kind of a second part question, do we have guidelines in terms of writing the content? Because I'm assuming people may want to include graphics or pictures, or what do we not want to include? Do we want to make sure that if we're including pictures or something that it's paid for, if we have money for that?
So, great question. I think it depends on what it is that you're talking about. And so if this goes for everyone, if you come across something that you feel you need to add and there's a dollar amount associated to it, just follow up with me and let me know. Because if you can build an argument as to why it's important, then I'm sure we can find the money from somewhere. So I'm not going to necessarily say that we have a set budget for it, but I know that we can allocate funds if it's something that is very critical. And so as far as the guidelines, think about something that's going to be, think about I'm gonna keep it flexible for now. If I'm noticing that it's a struggle for some people, then I'll add more structure to it. What I can say is think about what's going to be the most engaging way to deliver the content. And so I want you to use that as your guide in terms of how you put this together. What we're finding is that we have a lot of words. If you ever looked at the MIP manual, which I encourage you to do, it's in the Google Drive. And so it's words and not enough pictures, right? So think about how do you balance that. So I think that if you think about when it comes to things like pictures and these other graphics, think about how can these, what value do they add to the content that you're trying to deliver? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I just know the younger me would have probably just Google searched and pulled the best looking thing or the one that made most sense. So potentially providing some sort of guideline so that people aren't, I guess, including copyrighted images or something that we don't want to be using unless we have permissions or have purchased licenses for.
So let me see if I understand your question. Are you saying is your question more about what we include in there or what brothers may be using?
So I guess it would be a little bit of both. Just because when I've created content for my own business in the past, like those images and things that I've used have needed to be purchased. So maybe just creating some sort of guidelines for creating that content for us and everybody who's contributing to that process, so that we don't, potentially put ourselves in a position where we're taking anything from somebody else that is not accounted for.
Got it. Okay, now I understand your question much better. So that's a great point. So one of the things that we want to be cognizant of as we talk about being aligned with our fraternity values and standards, also thinking about branding policy. And I know that with the new branding policy, that is something that is talked about, not to use copyrighted material. So as we're writing this, brothers, let's stay away from copyrighted material. If you find a graphic that's open source, and you can go to Google and you can see what is open source. If it's open source, if you find it on Wikipedia, if it's on Google and it says it's free to use, then use it. But again, when we're talking about, whether it's Marvel Comics or, a TV show, let's look to stay away from those sort of things. Although we have some flexibility at times because we're doing them for educational purposes. So say if you wanted to you were doing the leadership retreat and you want to talk about branding and you want to show a Nike commercial and talk about the Nike brand and how strong it is, right? That you can recognize it without them even saying it's Nike, and you use a Nike video, you may be able to get away with that because we're doing it for educational purposes. Like we're not selling MIP to anyone else or the Crescent Club Development Program to anyone else. If you find yourself in that situation, let's have a conversation because we can bring in Brother Kevin Davis, who's also part of the team, as far as how that will work with branding, and maybe we can talk to our legal counsel as well to make sure that that we're in the clear. So what I'll say to you is, sky's the limit. Be creative. When it comes to things that you may potentially feel are infringing on something, maybe a violation, come to me first and let's have that conversation so that I'm able to better guide you through that process. How does that sound?
Got it. Sounds good.
Excellent. Thank you. Someone asked in the chat, will there be a contact list provided for this committee? Yes. In the Google Drive, and I'll make sure to hyperlink it individually in the body of the email, I have the whole document with everyone's names and emails. So you'll be able to contact your groups. Any other questions?
Hey, Raphael, this is TJ. Just one follow-up. I think on the conversation we just had, if we, for the majority of stuff, if we just reference the site or the source that we got something from, that will suffice. most of the things I think that brothers will probably use in this.
Yes.
So it might not necessarily that you can't use it. You just need to do like teach you in college, which is to cite your source.
Yes, very good. Thank you. You are quite correct. Any other questions?
This is Theo.
Yes, Theo.
One thing that I was thinking in terms of the brotherhood retreats, I'm all about making sure we do most efficient work. And so one of the things that came to mind was like a retreat is often tough to put together. Some brothers might be putting together a retreat for the first time. So we can definitely put together some standards to help that process be easier. But I think, especially for collegiate brothers, there are going to be opportunities on campus that are already put together, leadership workshops and retreats that maybe we could have qualify as, if you go to this standardized leadership retreat through your campus, that it could count for points or something like that in terms of some development. So just a thought that I was having as you were speaking is how do we use leadership opportunities on campus that are already being given to qualify for some of their development.
So I'll say this, that I think, yes, they can definitely use that in addition to. One of the things of why we added the Brotherhood Development Retreats is because brothers talked about having more time to build relationships with the candidates. And so, to your point, one of the reasons why we're going to spend time training and developing the Crescent Club Development Program consultants is so that they can guide and help chapters, especially the chapters who are not good at planning retreats or haven't had that experience, learn to plan them on their own, because it's also part of it is that learning experience for them. So I think that I encourage brothers to have Crescents go to other leadership opportunities on campus and encourage them to go to other leadership opportunities on campus. And I also want to make sure that we're using them to teach them valuable skills and to make it an opportunity to bring them closer together, because we're adding these, one, to address some gaps in terms of knowledge and information for our collegiate brothers in particular, but just brothers in general, and two, give them an opportunity for them to interact and build a closer relationship, which has been one of the biggest feedback that we received as far as the current MIP and how it's structured. But yours is duly known, and we'll make sure to remind brothers to find out other leadership opportunities and encourage Crescents to participate in those. There is a question as far as someone asked, did the president or the international executive director give us a time frame as to when this will be implemented after review? So this is the time that we're looking at ideally spring 19, but at the very latest fall 19. So by fall 2019, we will have the Crescent Club Development Program in effect. And a part of it is that we want to spend time figuring out the different technology around it and also training and preparing brothers for this. So by fall 2019 at the latest, we will have begun rolling out the Crescent Club Development Program across the nation. Other questions?
Hey, Raphael, this is TJ.
Yes.
Might be my last question. So as we move towards this new process and we begin the training for this, and taking into consideration a lot of the issues we have, even though people say we're not doing MIP, a lot of the hazing issues we have during the current MIP process, how we educate and encourage brothers through this new content that while this provides you more opportunity to interact with the members, this should not be an opportunity for you to cause this fraternity to be at harm's risk. Like, where does that part come in? Will that be in the content, or are we anticipating that just comes through the actual training and or the region directors or whoever the MIP chairman is?
Let me see if I understand your question correctly. How are we going to train brothers to understand that they cannot continue to engage in hazing activities that can put the fraternity at risk?
Yeah.
Okay.
In so many words, yes, because we're about to give them the green light on being directly involved with this, which technically, from my point of view, they always could be involved in. I know some region directors or past region directors or current region directors didn't allow them to it, but in essence, you always should have access to them. But this is about to be an all-open green light saying, hey, you take over the entire process, you do it the way that you want to do it, and that could, for individuals or for chapters that don't have a good structure from alumni chapter oversight, and they're listening to a lot of brothers who tell them how it used to be back in the day, that could provide opportunity for them to put the fraternity at risk. And I just want to, even if it's a subliminal messaging throughout everybody's content saying this is not an opportunity, or however they want to word it, to put the fraternity at risk.
Sure, T, that is a great question. There are a couple of things. One, the call out here is we're not telling them you can do whatever you want. We're making it clear. We're giving you more flexibility. We're giving you more freedoms that you've had in the past. What do those freedoms look like? You get to call the guys crescents. They'll have crescent pins. We'll get to talk about attire they can wear. You get to maintain your little secrecy component, but also there's a transparency piece in terms of connecting with the campus advisor, so that way the campus advisor know who the guys are, and the campus advisor will need to sign off on paperwork, because right now the way our process is set up with MIP, if I'm joining the fraternity, I don't never have to go to my fraternity sorority life office to get anything signed off. So one, bringing in the campus advisor, the fraternity sorority life advisor into the mix, they're going to need to be one of the signatures as far as knowing that there's a Crescent Club about to start for whatever chapter. As far as education-wise, I think, one, still taking that stance that it is unacceptable, and if anyone is found responsible, we're talking about dissolving charters and expelling members, making that very clear that that's not going away, that that's probably going to get heightened more because we're giving you a lot more than you've had before, at least in the last 20-something years, legally, right? You get to do a lot more stuff than any of us have been able to do. And so helping them to understand that we're playing up the rites of passage component. So, you having a crescent ceremony at the beginning, they can't start until they go to the crescent ceremony and they get pinned. We're going to have that component there.
Yeah, I get you. I guess I just wanted to see if it was going to be documented somewhere because,
yes.
Stuff just not great all the time. Like my collegiate chapter, I went back there last fall and they was like, we don't do fall intake. And I was like, where you get that from? They just told us that. And I was like, I can give you 30 lines of fall intakes. But this is something that just came up with over the last 2-3 years because they just happen not to have fall intake. So stuff like that happens, and then you get this, if it's not written anywhere, brothers come up with something on their own interpretation of now you have much more flexibility than we had in the past. So I just want to make sure they have somewhere to go or it's presented at some point in time that lets them know that they shouldn't be taking this somewhere. It's not.
I think one of the things that we can do is, to your point of what you experienced with your undergraduate chapter, we can do a frequently asked question section, or just like a Mythbusters section or something to that effect, where we're telling them things like, if you hear that you only do lines in a certain time, where is that coming from, right? Like, talk to your school? Like, is that something, helping them understand that there are certain things that maybe some quote unquote traditions that happen because the chapter came up with it, but it's not necessarily fraternity law. So helping them to understand what is fraternity law and that everything else is made up, and helping them discern it. So that's something that we can definitely help them do as far as the educational piece. And so that brings me to another point. One of the things that we want to do with this program, to what TJ was saying, is make it really a valuable and really educational experience, and moving less away from being more punitive, although the punitive will always be there, but how do we train and help brothers understand different policies and procedures that maybe they're not grasping or getting. So that's going to be something that as we put the program together, we'll be able to add that component as well. But right now we want to focus on the content of the education because that is our priority. But again, as you have these different ideas and questions, and I'll get a document going in the Google folder that anyone, that all of us can add to, just sort of put this a running list of things that we need to keep in mind and to make sure that we're writing down and explaining to brothers participating in the program. So I appreciate you bringing that up, Brother Lewis. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm sitting here listening, and I think we're all hoping for, the most ideal results, and everybody coming out with, excellent new members and all that kind of thing. And I always think that when people have an example of what is the standard, like, it helps improve overall the outcome. And so I'm just sitting here wondering, is there a way to do like a small pilot with a chapter that maybe has like chapter of the year in their region or something like that, where we can kind of show an example either through video or picture of what this process looks like in terms of, okay, here's an example of a successful discussion, and display it for brothers to say, like, oh, okay, like, I can shape it around this, right? So not just a written manual, but something visual that they can potentially see, I think would be helpful. But that's for later down the line.
So, Brother Fausto, your point, again, these are all things that we have explored and we discussed. We want to use technology. How do we use social media a lot more in these areas? And once we get this content written, we'll reconvene again to discuss, okay, what are the next steps? What do we need to do next to make this happen? So that's definitely coming down the pike. As far as piloting the program, I know that's something that I had talked about doing. But again, we want to get through this first to see what that's going to look like. Any other questions? All right, brothers. It's 8:33. We started at 7:35 Central Time, so I am going to go ahead and say that unless there are any more pressing questions, we will put this conversation on hold because I want to be respectful of your time. So at this point, by tomorrow morning, you'll get a detailed email from me telling you where to find the information that you need. By Tuesday, team leaders, please make sure you contact your group and you start setting up the meetings and going from there. You will see that once you start diving into your content, you will see that for the most part you have a lot of these things already written out there. It's just a matter of you putting it into that facilitated guide format that I showed you. And so there are examples for you to take a look at. So if there aren't any more questions, brothers, I am going to bid you farewell. Thank you very much, and you all have a great evening.